Domain 5.3. Explain the processes associated with third-party risk assessment and management. So in this video, we're going to be going over two major objectives. So vendor assessment and selection, and then we're going to go over the different agreement types, and then vendor monitoring, questionnaires, and rules of engagement. And this will be two separate videos going over Domain 5.3. So the first thing we're going to talk about is vendor assessment. So vendor assessment serves several key purposes in cybersecurity and risk management. One, it's going to do risk identification for you. So the primary goal of vendor assessment is to identify potential risks associated with third-party relationships. Two, it's going to deliver us some data protection. Organizations often share sensitive data with vendors, such as customer information and IP, intellectual property. A vendor assessment helps ensure that these data sharing agreements are secure and compliant with data protection regulations. Things like the GDPR or HIPAA or even maybe PCI, DSS compliance. And then it's also going to give us some regulatory compliance as well. So many industries have specific regulatory requirements that organizations must adhere to. A vendor assessment ensures that vendors are also in compliance with these regulations. Another thing we have to look at is our reputation management as well. So the actions and security practices of vendors can directly impact the organization's reputation. So if you go into business with a vendor and they have a data breach, or they're not really well known in the industry to be secure, well, that can harm your reputation as well. So it's important that when we're gonna use a vendor for any of our hardware or software in our organization, we want to vet them properly. We also want to make sure that we have the right documents in place that we're going to go over, like service level agreements, possibly NDAs, possibly MOUs, memorandums of understandings between you and that vendor. Okay, penetration testing. So this is a simulated cyber attack against an enterprise IT systems to check for exploitable vulnerabilities. So guys, penetration testing. I am not going to be able to describe to you in a single slide what pen testing is and how in-depth and deep it can go, right? This is a whole entire cybersecurity career sometimes just doing penetration testing. At a high level for the Security Plus exam, what you do need to know is that penetration testing is a way to have a third party come in and test our defense in depth and to test our organization's responses, okay? So just imagine you are a SOC analyst, or scratch that. Let's pretend you're a CISO and you want to make sure that maybe a new application you're launching or maybe just your entire enterprise is secure. You can hire penetration testing firms to actually come in and test your defenses. So this is a proactive security measure that's going to help in identifying vulnerabilities before they can be exploited. Now, listen, when hiring a penetration testing firm, there's so much you want to think about and so many things that you want to lay out prior, okay? One is the why. Go over your 5 W's. Why do we need this? When are we going to do this? Who are we going to hire for this? And so forth, right? Because to just do a penetration test with really no clear goal in mind, sometimes it's not good for the security team. Because you need to have purpose, right? You don't want to have a firm come in, mess up your whole system, and then pretty much on the back end be like, hey, you guys suck. That's not the purpose. It's to learn, it's to be proactive, and to have a collaborative effort with that penetration testing firm, with certain vendors, to create a better onion layer defense in depth security for the enterprise. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is a right to audit clause. So this is a contractual agreement between an organization and a third-party vendor or service provider that explicitly grants the organization the authority to conduct audits or assessments of the vendor's operations, including their information systems, their data handling processes, their security controls, and also compliance with the contractual obligations you may have written up. So a right to audit clause is something you may want to add into whatever agreement you have with a third party before going into business that ensures that the vendor maintains transparency and adheres to your agreed upon standards. It agrees that if they're providing you an SLA, that they're going to provide that service level. It allows for regular checkups. So regular and unplanned audits ensuring continuous compliance. And also this is legal and financial protection. This is going to protect the organization legally and financially in case of any discrepancies found during audits. Okay, evidence of internal audits. So these are going to be documents or reports provided by the vendor demonstrating the results and findings of their own internal audit activities. Now, again, for the Security Plus exam, we're going to learn about this. A vendor's goal is to sell you something. Do you trust that their internal audit is the only thing you may need to ensure that they're compliant? Now, we're not going to say that we're going into business with companies that are unethical, but just something to think about, right? This can be useful so that you can, maybe if you're deciding what third-party vendor to go with, and one provides an internal audit, at least that shows that they're taking it serious, their security and their compliance, and making sure that they're complying with data sovereignty laws and rules. So this gives you insight into the vendor's practices. It helps establish trust. Because if that vendor says, hey, look, we've had our SOC 2 audit. We've been ISO compliant just this last year within the past 6 months or year to 2 years. Of course, we're going to show that to the customer, and it's going to build that trust, okay? And then as far as external audits, third-party companies coming in, this can be used as a starting point of reference for external audits or further assessments, maybe that are done by you, the client. Independent assessments. So this is the evaluation of a vendor's controls and processes by an independent third party, usually an external auditor or security firm. So this is going to provide an unbiased view, right? So it's not you, the customer, doing it. It's not the company itself doing it with their own security team. This will be like that SOC 2 or the ISO compliance. So I just talked about that with evidence. Well, what we're saying here, right, is any audit can build trust. But moving on. So this benefit of an independent assessment is that it comes from specialized expertise and industry knowledge of the assessors. So if we do that SOC 2 audit, that's the opinion of the SOC 2 auditor that maybe has done this for years, saying, hey, we trust their security controls. This is going to add credibility to the vendor's claims about their security and compliance status. Something else we're going to have to be aware of is the supply chain. So we want to make sure from factory to on the shelf that we are doing an analysis of our supply chain. And if we can't mitigate something, we're at least making the correct analysis to say, hey, these are the key points of where we could be compromised. So this gives us end-to-end risk management. So as long as we can assess the supply chain, we can take note, we can document of where potential risk lies. We can present that to higher management and say, hey, here's our supply chain analysis. Here's what we believe that the hardware we're getting from vendor XYZ or the things that we're producing for XYZ customer or client could potentially be breached, okay? This is going to identify risk associated with third-party vendors. Kind of just going through that chain, right? Is there hands in the supply chain that we didn't know about or shouldn't be? Vendor selection. So the process of evaluating and choosing the most suitable vendor is based on the organization's requirements and risk appetite. So what we're saying here is, okay, as an organization, we have our risk appetite, we have our risk tolerance that's given to us on a top-down level, right? From management, from high up down to us. There's levels of obfuscation there, right? So we say, hey, our risk appetite is high. It's high. So if it's high, maybe we go with that startup company that's offering a service at half the price, knowing that their team may not be as experienced or may not be as security mindset or security heavy, and they may go out of business after their Series B gets denied, right, from their venture capital. That is how we make our vendor selection. We look at, as an organization, what's our criteria, right? What's our risk? And then using that as a baseline, we go out and make sure that some of the vendors we may be looking at align with our business objectives. And that could be financial, that could be cyber risk, and that could also be just, does it meet our demands? Does it meet what we need the best, okay? So something that we're going to want to do is a risk-benefit analysis. This is going to balance the benefits of engaging with the vendor against the potential risk involved. Due diligence. So this is going to be a comprehensive appraisal of a business or individual performed by a prospective buyer or partner to establish its assets and liabilities and evaluate its commercial potential. So due diligence. This involves a deep dive into the vendor's financial, operational, legal, and compliance records. This is essentially you as the organization. You want to make sure that you have everything in place for that vendor selection. You're doing your due diligence to identify any red flags, to make sure you're doing a thorough investigation of the history of that vendor and that you're protecting your organization, right? You want to make sure that you're providing a solid foundation for making an informed strategic choice when selecting a vendor to make sure it aligns with the organizational goals and to protect your organization, right? That's what doing due diligence is. Due diligence, kind of the opposite of negligence, right? So due diligence is we are being extra in our assessments. And that's something as a cybersecurity professional that you're providing to the organization, okay? Part of your goals is to make sure systems are available, but that they're also protected, right? And if we're going with a third party, who's it going to fall on when there's a data breach in that third party? They're going to come straight to the SOC and say, did we do a proper analysis of this vendor or what happened? Okay, conflict of interest. So we want to also make sure that there is no conflict of interest between us and the vendor, okay? We don't want to have a competing interest or obligation. So we need to be completely transparent. So this requires potential vendors to disclose any relationships or interests that might influence their performance. And then we want to have good policy and procedures. So we want to have a clear policy in place to handle situations, where a conflict of interest is identified, okay? All right, awesome. So that was the first half of Domain 5.3. Now, let's go ahead and do our check on learning. So we're going to come here to vendor assessment and selection and take that domain quiz. Okay, question 1. In the context of third-party risk management, why is it important to identify and manage conflicts of interest? So we're going to go with B there, and that is to ensure that business relationships and decisions are based on objective criteria and that the best interests of the organizations are protected. Let's see what we got here. Awesome, we got it right with a little explanation out there at the bottom. Question 2. What is the primary goal of performing due diligence during the vendor selection process? So we're also going to go with B here, and that is to rigorously evaluate potential vendors' business practices, financial stability, and security posture before engagement. Question 3. How does penetration testing of third-party vendors enhance an organization's security posture? That's going to be by actively identifying vulnerabilities and security weaknesses in the vendor systems before they can be exploited by attackers. Question 4. What is the role of independent assessments in third-party risk management? That is going to be A, to provide an unbiased review of the vendor's practices, controls, and compliance with security standards. Question 5. What is the significance of including a right to audit clause in contracts with third-party vendors? That is going to be B, to provide the organization the legal right to audit the vendor's processes and controls relevant to the services provided. Last question, question 6. Why is supply chain analysis critical in third-party risk management? We're going to go with C, to identify and manage risks presented by indirect relationships in an organization's supply chain. And all right, we got 100%.